Hey guys, how's it going? This is the MMA breakdown with my predictions for UFC on Fox 12, Lawler versus Brown. I'm very excited for this card. Um, I'm not a fan of the new UFC strategy, the international expansion, and all of the cards they're running. It's almost a card every weekend now, and especially this summer, there's just been a lot of fight night cards that I haven't been too excited for, and I didn't think a lot of those cards turned out to be too exciting. But this is the card to get excited for. It's not stacked top to bottom, but the main card is very good, and the featured prelim, Jorge Masvidal and Darren Cruickshank, great fight, great matchmaking there. And the main card, again, very good. This is what a high-level MMA card should look like. Very excited for it. Definitely, by far, no comparison, the best fight night card, the best free card we've gotten from the UFC in a very long time. Definitely the best free card of the year. I think this is a more exciting card with more intriguing matchups than the 175 pay-per-view, and I seriously mean that. I don't think there's been a fight night card this good since the initial debut fight night on Fox Sports 1. That was a card stacked top to bottom, but the main card here is very good. Prelim card, not very good. Typical modern day UFC prelim fight night card, prelim cards on fight night cards. A lot of filler, a lot of guys making their debuts. A lot of fights I'm gonna have to skip over, but let's get right to it. And one more thing, Josh Thomson versus Bobby Green. Was very disappointed that Michael Johnson fell out with an injury. That was another fight that I just thought was superb matchmaking, a really competitive fight. Great matchup for both guys, and really Michael Johnson's opportunity to break through into the top 10. And Bobby Green's a good fighter. I just don't like this matchup as much, and that fight falling through kind of put a damper on this whole event for me, but still I'm very excited for this card. Starting off with the UFC Fight Pass preliminary card. Women's strawweight bout, Juliana Lima versus Joanna Jedrzejczyk. I'm sure I mispronounced that terribly, but this is the second women's strawweight fight in the UFC. Just had the first one, Claudia Gadelha. She beat Tina Lahat just last night, actually. That was a decent fight, but I'm not going to make a pick here because I just don't know either of these women. Next up, welterweight, another fight. Got to skip over. Andreas Stahl versus Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns, Brazilian, undefeated, but don't know either guy, and going to skip over that one too. And actually, 3 of the 4 Fight Pass prelims feature 2 fighters making their debuts. But this fight here at featherweight, Steven Siler versus Noad Lahat. I'm taking Steven Siler in this fight. I thought after he knocked out Mike Brown a year ago on the debut Fight Night card on Fox Sports 1, I thought he was set to really do big things in the division, and he had some setbacks against Dennis Bermudez and Honey Jason. The Bermudez fight was competitive, but he got out wrestled, and Honey Jason kind of wiped the floor with him, knocking him out in the first round. But Steven Siler, a guy I have a lot of respect for, he came off of TUF 14. Lost to Diego Brandao in the house pretty badly, but since coming in the UFC, he's done very well. and they threw him right in the deep end coming off the show. He fought Cole Miller in just his second fight in the UFC and got a decision. That's serious stuff. Lost to Darren Elkins, but had the big win over Mike Brown before his recent 2-fight losing streak. But Siler is a super aggressive fighter, has power on the feet like he showed against Mike Brown. Against Kurt Hollabaugh, he took the back, was very aggressive, looking for submissions and looking for that ground and pound. Against Joey Gambino, just stormed him early and got him with a guillotine choke. Steven Siler is a very aggressive fighter, very tenacious, always looking for that finish. Very tall for the weight class as well, but doesn't really fight like a tall fighter. Doesn't really use his length to jab. He makes it a brawl and always looking for that finish. He has a very aggressive ground game, and I think he's going to win this fight. Noad Lahat, coming off of his debut loss to Godofredo Pepe Castro, got knocked out by a flying knee. Really didn't see too much from him in that fight. Don't know much about his game, but Steven Siler, I think, is a very talented fighter, and he's really in desperate need of a win. 3-fight losing streak would be very bad for him at this point, but I still think he has a lot to offer, and I still think he is that same fighter who knocked out Mike Brown and has had some very impressive performances in the UFC. So I'm taking Siler here. I think he comes out very aggressive and gets the finish at some point. And the last fight on the Fight Pass preliminary card, again, 2 guys making their debuts, and I can't make a pick here. Lightweight fight, Akbar Arreola versus Thiago Dos Santos. Got to skip over that. And moving on to the preliminary card, which is on Fox, not Fox Sports 1, and I think that's a great move by Fox or the UFC, whoever made this decision, putting a higher volume of fights on Fox one night. I think that's going to help them a lot. I never really understood the strategy for these free fight night cards for the Fox for these Fox cards, where they would put the prelims on Fox Sports 1. I don't think people who are looking to watch the main card, I don't think they're gonna want to go find I don't think they're gonna want to go find another channel to watch the prelim. So I think that's a really good decision. But first fight on the Fox preliminary card, featherweight fight, Michael De La Torre versus Brian Ortega. Another fight that I'm not going to be making an official pick just because I don't know anything about Brian Ortega. Just looking at his page here, he's undefeated, 8-0. Has a few submission wins and the rest are decisions, but Mike De La Torre debuted against Mark Bocek, and he looked very good. Really lit up Bocek on the feet in that fight. Seemed to have very good boxing, very aggressive striking, and actually, as I remember, stuffed a lot of Bocek's takedowns. Bocek, tried to make it dirty, close the distance, push him up against the fence, and I actually remember that fight being a robbery. I thought De La Torre won that fight. But I thought he looked very impressive. I think he might get the win here just based off of that performance, but can't make a pick and can't give any analysis on Ortega, but look for De La Torre to have a good performance. He looked really impressive against Bocek, who is a very, very talented grappler and a guy who has fought a lot of higher level competition in the UFC. Moving on, light heavyweight, the return of Kyle Kingsbury taking on Patrick Duncan, I think is his nickname, Patrick Durkin Cummins. I think this is another great matchup. Very intriguing. Kyle Kingsbury retired a few years back after his loss to Jimmy Manuwa. He was actually on a 3-fight losing streak before retiring. Lost to Bonner, Glover Teixeira, and Jimmy Manuwa. But before that, he had some good performances. He had a win over Fabio Maldonado, which is nothing to it's nothing to ignore. Fabio Maldonado still in the UFC, and not a lot of guys picked up wins over him. He's a real tough guy, and Kingsbury was able to get a win over him. He also had a finish over Ricardo Romero, very quick knockout early in that fight. And Patrick Cummins took that fight against Cormier, got steamrolled, and then beat Roger Narvaez last month in the Albuquerque card, where I actually didn't think he looked great. He was able to get the takedown, but didn't seem particularly athletic. Didn't seem like the takedown came that easily for him. I was able to ground and pound Narvaez out. Pretty much seemed like he got the win by brute force, not much technique. Really used his strength to his advantage. I think Kingsbury is the more skilled fighter. I think on the feet, Kingsbury is going to be a little better. I don't know how that layoff is going to affect him. And he did retire, so it's not like he's been fighting these couple of years since he's been gone. Who knows how that layoff will affect him. If this was the Kingsbury before he retired, this fight was taking place a couple years ago. Kingsbury against the Cummins we've seen now. I think Kingsbury wins easily. Solid wrestling. Kingsbury also has out-wrestled Razak Al Hassan. I just think Kingsbury's more skillful on the feet. I also think, like I said, solid wrestling. He was out-grappled by Stephan Bonner. Cummins being the wrestler, he could have that control advantage on the ground, but again, I didn't think his takedowns looked that great. They didn't seem to come that easily against Narvaez. Close, tough matchup, but I'm going to take Kingsbury. I think he wins a decision. And also against Jimmy Manuwa, a guy who's a pretty talented striker, Kingsbury was getting busted up early in that fight, but he kept taking Manuwa down. He got a few takedowns on him, and looked like he was going to make a fight out of that. But the fight was stopped due to a doctor stoppage. So Kingsbury is a tough guy, and I'm picking him to win this fight, but close matchup. Moving on, welterweight fight. Hernani Perpetuo taking on Tim Means. Tim the Dirty Bird Means. Taking Tim Means to win this fight. Was very impressed with him. His first couple of fights in the UFC, he fought Bernardo Magalhães in his debut, and he showed very good knees in the tie clinch, and then steamrolled Justin Salas in his next fight, who Justin Salas just coming off of a loss to Joe Proctor the other night. But Salas has been a guy who's improved and proven to be a decent fighter for his talent level. But Tim Means looked very impressive in that fight. And then he had some tough decisions against Jorge Masvidal and Danny Castillo, where he basically just lost the wrestling battle, spent a little too much time on his back. But against Masvidal, he was very active, throwing elbows and striking off of his back. And against Castillo, was doing better on the feet than Castillo, but couldn't stop the takedown. Had 2 wins outside of the UFC, and then in his last fight against Neil Magny, I thought he looked pretty different from the guy who who fought in the UFC before. Didn't look as aggressive. Even got dropped by Magny at one point, and Magny has proven to be a good fighter and is really improving. Had a knockout recently, but did not look himself against Magny. Didn't seem to have any sense of urgency. After the first couple of rounds didn't go so well. He's getting outstruck, outpointed. Magny was winning the clinch battle. Nothing seemed to really be working for Tim Means, and he just doesn't seem like he can kick it into another gear when he really needs to do something different to win the fight. But Hernani Perpetuo, coming off of his debut, lost to Jordan Meehan, where he did not. That was a tough fight for either guy for him to look good, and Meehan was very conservative on the feet. And Perpetuo did have him in a knee bar, which seemed like it was threatening Meehan for a little bit, but not a very memorable performance. Nothing really happened on the feet in that fight, and I believe Meehan got some takedowns, so not a lot to really analyze in Perpetuo's game. I don't know about his fights outside of the UFC. I think he fought to get in the house from Tough Brazil 2. I don't believe he had made it to the house, but taking Tim Means, if he comes out real aggressive like he did against Salas and Bernardo Magalhães, I think he can win this fight. And the featured prelim, again, super excited for this fight. Great matchmaking. Lightweight Jorge Gamebred Masvidal taking on Darren, the Detroit superstar, Cruickshank. Really close matchup, close one to call. Darren Cruickshank, I was super impressed with his last head kick knockout win over Eric Koch. Cruickshank is off of Tough 15. He got knocked out by James Vick in the house, but has done very well since coming to the UFC. Had a couple setbacks to sorry guys, trying to do this from my head, but John McDessie and Adriano Martins. And Adriano Martins is a guy I really respect and think is going to do big things, but really looked good in his wins. Taekwondo style striker, karate style also. Had a great head kick knockout over Henry Martinez, decision win over Yves Edwards, and then his last two fights looked very good. Had a wheel kick knockout against Mike Rio, and in his last fight I think he really elevated to a new level, knocking out Eric Koch. He had great performances before, but he was beating up pretty low level guys. Henry Martinez, who isn't in the UFC anymore, and Mike Rio, a tough veteran who didn't do well on the show at all. He got choked out by Andy Ogle, and in the UFC wasn't his only win came against another castmate from the house, John Kofer. And Eric Koch, a guy who had fought a lot of high-level competition and had some really great wins himself. Eric Koch has a knockout win over Rafael Sunsao, current #1 contender at bantamweight. And so for Cruickshank to get that knockout win over him, to do what he was doing against lower-level competition against Koch, I was very impressed by that. Throws a lot of head kicks, very sneaky with those kicks. You don't see them coming. Likes to use that sideways stance. That can hurt him sometimes, like against John McDessie. Started off well, but that sideways stance kind of hurt him and couldn't keep McDessie on the outside. McDessie was able to get in and tag him. Against Adriano Martins, he was just he was knocked down in that fight and submitted on the ground. but a very wild striker, a lot of unorthodox techniques, a lot of spinning stuff. Against Eric Koch, the combination that knocked him out was a double head kick combo, threw a head kick with one leg and then immediately threw the back leg. Very impressive. I think Cruickshank will have the power advantage. Jorge Masvidal, just a very seasoned veteran, fought a lot of great guys. Coming off of a win over Pat Healy. His only loss since coming to the UFC has been to Rustam Khabilov in a fight that was pretty relatively competitive. He did get dropped by a wheel kick at one point, but that fight was, Khabilov, I wouldn't say dominated him, but had a win over Tim Means, where he used wrestling to get that win. Over Michael Chiesa, he was dropped in that fight, but was ripping off some beautiful combinations, where he would close in on Chiesa and throw some beautiful four-punch combinations where he would go to the body. Really, I was really impressed with that and able to get that Darce choke on Chiesa. And against Pat Healy, one of Pat Healy's main strengths is fighting in the clinch, making it dirty, and Masvidal was able to out-clinch Pat Healy, did very well in there, defended the takedown very well, and he's just a guy who's very well-rounded, has solid kickboxing, solid striking. Like I said, against Chiesa, he'll have those moments where he'll just fire off real good combinations, go into the body, a decent ground game, submitted Chiesa with the submission, Darce choke submission, and I think he's just a well-rounded guy, has some takedowns. Has been dropped though a few times. Like I said, Chiesa was able to drop him. Khabilov was able to drop him, and I think Cruickshank, being a big power striker and especially throws a lot of stuff that his opponents don't see coming, I think it's he has a good chance of landing something on Masvidal, putting him out. So I give Cruickshank the power advantage. If it goes 3 rounds, I think Masvidal might be a little more technical on the feet. He might be able to manage distance better throughout the fight than Cruickshank. And the wrestling, Masvidal I think might have a slight advantage. We haven't seen much of Cruickshank's wrestling. Last time he really wrestled was against Chris Tickle, which was his first fight off of the show, but should be a great fight. I'm going to pick Cruickshank, just given the fact that Masvidal, his chin's been a little suspect, and Cruickshank, obviously, that's his bread and butter. He's landing those lethal head kicks, wheel kicks. I think he'll be able to catch Masvidal with something. So I'm picking Cruickshank, but Masvidal is a very talented fighter, and he can definitely win this one. Onto the main card, lightweight Josh Thomson taking on Bobby King Green. Like I said, very disappointed that Michael Johnson couldn't continue with this fight, but still a good fight. Excited to see Josh Thomson get back at it. But this is an interesting matchup. Bobby Green has really developed well since that win over Jacob Volkman, where he submitted Volkman. Against James Krause, he started to get into a rhythm before landing that body kick, which was controversial whether it hit Krause in the groin or not, but that fight was stopped because of that, and really early we didn't get to see a whole lot of Bobby Green, but he was seemed to have the advantage boxing on the feet, and against Pat Healy, just put on a boxing clinic. only at the end of the fight when Healy was able to get on top of him and rain down some heavy punches. That was the only time Green was not having success in that fight. Green has a really funky boxing rhythm. He showed against Krause and Healy. Just really hard for his opponents to really get their hands on him and to land clean punches. Obviously, Krause and Healy. Healy not a very technical striker, and Krause is a technical striker, and he was returning some shots in that fight, but Bobby Green, really kind of a funky boxing game. Good defensive striking as well. Doesn't get hit too much. Josh Thomson, though, I think really showed a new asset when he knocked out Nate Diaz. Josh Thompson's a real good game plan guy. Figured out Nate Diaz, broke down his game, got that head kick knockout, very surprising and very impressive. And then against Ben Henderson, did very well to out-wrestle him. He got a lot of takedowns in that fight, and on the ground looked very good. Obviously a very controversial decision in that fight. A lot of people thought Thomson got robbed. But his wrestling and grappling looked very good. Thomson, though, when he gets in a good position on the ground, he doesn't seem to really open up with ground and pound when he could, and I think that really hurt him in the Ben Henderson fight. And on the feet, again against Nate Diaz looked great, but even in his fight with Gilbert Melendez and Ben Henderson, doesn't really seem to want to go after it on the feet too much. Looks more for that takedown and looks to make it a grappling match. So I think it's going to be Thompson's wrestling, his desire to wrestle against Bobby Green's boxing. If it stays on the feet, I think Thomson does have the power advantage. He could land something big like he did against Diaz, but I think it's more likely that Bobby Green outpoints him, outboxes him for 3 rounds. But I just don't know about Green's takedown defense. The only wrestler he's fought recently was Jacob Volkman, and Volkman was able to do his usual thing in that first round, get him down and work that smothering top control and ground and pound. I think Josh Thomson can do that. Bobby Green, impressive guy, coming along well, but just hasn't really proven himself against top competition yet, and Josh Thomson obviously has. So I'm going to take Thomson. I think he out-wrestles, out-grapples Bobby Green to win a decision, but Bobby Green could definitely win this. Really interesting matchup. Next up at featherweight, another just incredible matchup. Should be a very exciting fight. Clay the Carpenter Guida taking on Dennis Bermudez. I'm taking Bermudez to win this fight, and I don't think he has too much trouble getting the win. And I think he's going to get a late stoppage over Guida, 3rd round stoppage. I think he's going to wear Guida down throughout the fight with his constant takedowns, his constant slams, forward pressure on the feet, and I think he wears him down enough to get a stoppage in the 3rd round. Clay Guida, I think, has just been a shell of himself since dropping to featherweight. I think his best window, his peak in the sport was with that win over Anthony Pettis, out wrestling Pettis, and also had a very competitive fight with Ben Henderson in his next fight, but lost that, and then just kind of been on this downward spiral. I actually thought he won the fight against Gray Maynard, where he tried to reinvent himself as a point striker, I thought he won that fight, but lost it against Hatsu Hiyoki, his featherweight debut. Basically took Hiyoki down, and a lot of people thought Hiyoki got robbed because he was more active and threatening with his guard. But I scored that fight for Guida. But it's very evident in that fight when Guida gets on top, he just does not open up with ground and pound. Does not look for, doesn't have much submission ability, but really kind of sad when you consider, how exciting he was and beloved by fans. The fight he had with Diego Sanchez, and I think one of his very early fights in the UFC. Justin James, I think. I think it was Justin James. I remember seeing, rewatching the fight from long ago, but he took down the guy and just threw a bunch of short rabbit punches from the top position and got the rear naked choke. He just doesn't do that anymore. He gets guys down and he just it's lay and pray, basically. He doesn't open up with ground and pound. But in the Chad Mendes fight, got stopped in the third round and just couldn't keep up with Mendes on the feet, and showed that his wrestling is not good enough to out-wrestle another really good wrestler like Mendes. And Bermudez is also a very very persistent and aggressive wrestler. And then his last fight against Tatsuya Kawajiri, more of an exciting fight. Dropped Kawajiri on the feet early with a bomb he landed, and pretty much out-wrestled Kawajiri for the rest of the fight. But his takedowns against a Japanese fighter like Kawajiri, who's a good grappler, not a great wrestler. Guida's takedowns, I thought it was kind of surprising how hard it was for him to really get takedowns in that fight. He did have a big slam at one point, but Guida, is just not technical enough on the feet, not polished enough, I think, for Bermudez, who is also not a very technical striker, but does seem to have more of a polished striking game than Guida. But Bermudez, tough 14 veteran, and has just been very impressive since coming in the UFC. Nearly beat Diego Brandao in the finale to win the show. Knocked him down, dropped him with a punch, and got submitted. But he's on a 6-fight win streak, and he's just been improving and looking great in every fight. I thought he lost the fight against Max Holloway. I thought that was a robbery. I thought Holloway easily won that fight, but he just outworks people. He's a real workhorse. Against Steven Siler, just constant slams. Siler's trying to triangle him, and he would just pick him up and slam him, and he did that to Pablo Garza as well. He will slam you just for style points, and just hoping that the judges give him some points for picking guys up and slamming them, and also just to tire guys out. He expends a lot of energy, but he has the cardio to do it. He's constantly going for that takedown and picking guys up and slamming them over and over again. On the feet, he has great forward pressure, really aggressive and tenacious with the striking. Against Siler, really just got in his chest, in his face, throwing big haymakers the whole time. And against Jimmy Hedis, again, used his wrestling and was able to finish him off on the feet. Really showed that his striking is becoming a real weapon for him. So I think Bermudez is just getting better. And I think he's, if Guida just tries to wrestle with him, which I think he has to, I don't think he can stand with Bermudez. These guys can just, meet in the middle and trade leather, but Bermudez, I think, would have the striking advantage. So if Guida just wrestles him, I think Bermudez can out-wrestle him all day. I think he'll, I think we might see some great slams in this fight. But I think Bermudez wears him down with the pressure wrestling, the forward pressure on the feet, wears Guida down and gets that TKO in the third round. Next fight, co-main event, light heavyweight, Anthony Rumble Johnson taking on Antonio Rogerio Nogueira, Little Nog. Is anyone really taking Little Nog to win this fight? I don't think so. Anthony Rumble Johnson all the way. Looked incredible in his last win over Mr. Wonderful Phil Davis. Showed really good cardio in that fight to outstrike Davis for 3 rounds and constantly stuffing the takedown. Davis had nothing for him in that fight, and Johnson, with all of his weight cutting troubles, really showed good cardio in that last fight. If I had any criticism of him, I think he could have pushed the pace a little more. Come forward a little more. He was pretty much counter-striking in that fight against Phil Davis, but showed just a really composed striking game. And Nogueira, a guy who just isn't active anymore, rarely fights in the last couple of years. His last fight was UFC 156, Super Bowl weekend of 2013, so hasn't fought in a year and a half. He's always getting injured. He's way up there in age, 38. Yeah, I mean, come on, he can't beat Rumble Johnson. It would be incredibly shocking. But Lil Nog, a guy who never really wins impressively, but is conservative and laid back enough so that he never really gets run over, never looks terrible, but doesn't look impressive in his wins either. I mean, I think his most impressive fight in the UFC was his knockout of Tito Ortiz, where he went to the body and hurt Tito in that fight. Has only shown the knockout power really against Luis Kane, who is pretty much a washout. Even the Jason Brills fight, I thought he got out-wrestled, and I remember that clearly. That was a very controversial fight. Almost everyone thought Brills got robbed. And then against Bader, I actually scored that fight for him, but he just he doesn't defend the takedown well against good wrestlers. Guys have been able to take him down, Phil Davis and Ryan Bader, and score points that way. And Rumble Johnson, I don't think is as good a wrestler as either of those guys, but still a capable wrestler, very big, physical guy. I think he could get Lil Nog down if he chooses to wrestle. He could just lay on him, but not Lil Nog, just not very aggressive on the feet against Bader or Phil Davis. Tries to use a prodding jab, tries to set things up, but never really goes for anything big. Did in the Ortiz fight. And against Rashad Evans, he did win that fight, but nothing happened at all in that fight. That was a case of Rashad Evans being a head case and really doing nothing, and it's pretty much a case of Little Nog countering Evans a few times, jabbing him a few times. That was a very uneventful fight, and Lil Nog really did nothing. He's just going to be too slow for Rumble Johnson. Johnson's going to have the big power. I don't think Johnson's going to knock him out just because Lil Nog, again, I think he's going to sit back and really not do too much, just try to find an opening here and there, and I don't think Johnson's going to give it to him. So I expect Johnson to put on another striking clinic and outboxed Nogueira for 3 rounds. I mean, the only way Nogueira can win is if he lands a lucky shot, really, and that is extremely unlikely. Rumble Johnson is going to win by decision. In the main event, another just fantastic fight. Everyone's been looking forward to this since it was announced. Robbie Lawler taking on Matt the Immortal Brown, ruthless Robbie Lawler, welterweight fight. I think this is going to be one of the top 10 best fights in UFC history. I really do. I think it's going to live up to all the hype. Two guys who've just been surging in the welterweight division. And I think it's going to be very competitive. I do. Matt Brown, everyone keeps saying, he hasn't fought a top guy. He's been on this incredible win streak where he's just improved so much. I mean, even within this win streak, compare his finish win over Luis Ramos to how he just went forward against Eric Silva and just stormed him and really destroyed him with a prolonged beating against Eric Silva. Two totally different fighters. Matt Brown has just really perfected that style of aggressive striking and coming forward, and he has that X factor where he can get badly hurt. He proved that in the Eric Silva fight. Silva landing that kick to the body, hurting him real badly and getting his back taken, and Silva threatening with the rear naked choke, and Matt Brown surviving through that, and as soon as he got back to his feet, just went after Silva like an animal and destroyed him. And Robbie Lawler, what a great career rejuvenation, returning to the UFC from Strikeforce, a guy who, lost to Lorenz Larkin, Babaluso Brawl before that, Tim Kennedy, who is a top fighter, but still was just getting out hustled by guys, and didn't look like he was really working that hard for the win. What an incredible career turnaround since coming back to the UFC. The first guy to really make Josh Koscheck look like he's too old for the game. Just ran over Koscheck in his first fight coming back to the UFC. Great knockout over Bobby Volker. Just dismantled him, landed that head kick against Rory McDonald. The first guy to break McDonald's win streak and really use aggression and forward pressure to overcome McDonald's technique and technical striking game, and then had that war with Hendricks, which was a really razor thin fight. Hendricks did win, but Lawler got his shots in and hurt Hendricks badly in that fight. And then against Jake Ellenberger, another very impressive, very clean performance where he just dismantled him and got the third round knockout, winning for that kill after jabbing up Ellenberger for a couple rounds. Threw a flying knee in the third round, I believe, and was able to get the finish there over another dangerous welterweight. So both guys have been incredible, but I am taking Robbie Lawler. I think this fight can go the distance, and again, I think it's just going to be incredible. But Robbie Lawler has a few more tools in his striking game. He's added that head kick. He's added that head kick to his game. They used to knock out Bobby Volker. He also landed it on McDonald in the first round. And also against Jake Ellenberger, I think he landed it early, some point in the fight. Also, he's added a very good jab. It was very evident against Jake Ellenberger. against Johnny Hendricks, just kind of stood in front of him and brawled, just throwing haymaker after haymaker. But against Ellenberger, really tightened up his technique, polished up that jab, and it was very effective against Ellenberger. Jabbed up his eye for a couple rounds there, and also Lawler. He does not need to chase you down, put you against the cage. He can plant his feet and fire off, finishing shots. He can stand in the middle of the cage and knock you out. Whereas Matt Brown, really all of his knockout wins in his recent win streak, he has to come forward and push you back, chase you down, put guys on their heels, chase them back to get their back to the fence, and he has that forward pressure. That's how his knockouts have come. That's what he did against Mike Pyle, against Mike Swick. Very identical looking knockouts. And in his last fight, obviously against Eric Silva, that forward pressure, he lunges forward with his punches, and that's how he knocks guys out. So I think it's really going to be a battle of if Robbie Lawler can stand his ground and resist that forward pressure by Matt Brown. When Brown comes forward and blitzes you, that's where he's very dangerous and can knock you out. I don't think it's out of the question that Matt Brown can catch Lawler and put him out. I think that's very possible. But again, I think it goes the distance. I think Lawler, his striking, just more polished, more technical. He has that jab. I think he wins a decision. Matt Brown, I think, will probably take a few rounds, but I think Lawler just gets it done with a little more varied striking game and the more skilled striking game. But I think it's going to be just an incredible fight. But yeah, I'm taking Robbie Lawler to win a decision. All right, guys. So those are my predictions for UFC on Fox 12, Lawler versus Brown. Thanks a lot for watching, as always. I would really appreciate it if you'd like the video and subscribe if you like my content. I'll do a recap for this event, and check out my recap for Fight Night 45, Cerrone versus Miller, and also have a recap for Fight Night 46 or Fight Night Dublin, McGregor versus Brandao. All right, guys, thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye.